Congressman Byron Donalds, a Republican from Florida and a staunch MAGA supporter, sat beneath the gold-trimmed seal of the U.S. House Oversight Committee, flanked by flags and files, his sharp gaze matching the precision of his tone. With $600,000 in taxpayer dollars, a private prosecutor lacking public accountability, a concealed romantic relationship, and a sudden departure from LAX after the breakup, if that didn't signal corruption, perhaps the political climate in Fulton County had numbed the senses. Outside Washington, D.C., life carried on as usual. Tourists snapped selfies, staffers rushed past Capitol Police, and cherry blossoms swayed in the breeze. But inside Rayburn Room 2141, reputations were on the line. As the gavel came down hard, Donalds wasted no time. His voice was crisp, deliberate, and heavy with implication. We are not here to discuss broken hearts or personal relationships. This isn't TMZ. This is Congress. The room absorbed his words in silence, broken only by the scratching of pens and a nervous cough from the gallery. He continued, "We are here to investigate serious allegations of misconduct and abuse of power within the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. Allegations that suggest District Attorney Fani hired a man she was romantically involved with, funneled nearly $700,000 in taxpayer funds to him, and then assigned him the most politically sensitive case in the nation, the prosecution of former President Donald J. Trump." Straightening in his chair, he tapped his pen twice on the desk. "Let me be clear. If these allegations are true, this isn't just poor judgment. This is public corruption. This is the potential weaponization of the justice system. This could be a conspiracy to subvert due process under the guise of law. This is not a soap opera. This is about the Constitution." Then, perfect timing. The back door swung open and all heads turned. Fani Willis entered, not with a grand display or defiant entourage, but flanked only by her attorney, both dressed in quiet gray. There was no dramatic flair, just a steady walk toward the witness chair, like a surgeon approaching the table. Except today, she wasn't holding the scalpel. She was the specimen. She sat down, adjusted the microphone, and remained silent. Congressman Byron Donalds let the moment linger, flipping a page before looking up, studying her like a prosecutor dissecting motive. "Miss Willis, I trust you understand the gravity of the allegations before you today. You are not on trial, but your credibility, your ethics, and your conduct in the eyes of the American people are." He leaned in slightly, his presence tightening like a hunter locking onto a target. "So I'll say it once, so there's no confusion. This is not about your heartbreak. This is about the integrity of American justice." No smiles, no laughter, no applause. Just the hum of cameras and the sharp breath of a dozen staffers sensing the moment everything shifted. Donalds wasted no time. "Let's get to the point. Miss Willis," he said, his voice as sharp as a scalpel, slicing through any pretense. "When did your romantic relationship with Mr. Wade end?" The words hung in, the air like a subpoena. Willis blinked once, her lips parting as if searching for solid footing before stepping into a response. "I would say it ended sometime in late summer of 2023, she offered carefully, eyes flicking toward her attorney like a swimmer checking for a lifeguard. Donalds nodded slightly, not in agreement, but in confirmation, like a chess player recognizing an opponent's misstep. "So not June, not July?" he pressed, his tone neutral but razor-edged. Willis hesitated. "We had a tough conversation in August," she admitted, her voice softening as if trying to smooth the sharp edges of accountability. Donalds didn't blink. "A tough conversation," he repeated, eyebrows raised. "Miss Willis, I'm not asking about your emotional calendar. I'm asking for a factual end date to a romantic relationship with a man you paid hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars to prosecute a former president. She inhaled sharply, the weight of the question pressing in. The room was silent, save for the faint rustling of reporters adjusting in their seats. Fani Willis exhaled, then spoke carefully. In my experience, men believe a relationship ends when the physical intimacy stops. Women believe it ends when the conversation does. When we had that conversation in August, she trailed off. Congressman Byron Donalds sat back, slowly clasping his hands before delivering his next line, not as a question, but as a diagnosis. A tough conversation is not a termination, Miss Willis, especially when you're still flying with the man months later. Willis froze. Donalds let the weight of his words settle, long enough for reporters to scribble notes, long enough for her counsel to shift uncomfortably in his seat. Then, with calculated ease, he pulled out a printed still image and held it up. The photo, clear and undeniable, showed two familiar figures in an airport terminal, side by side, wheeling luggage through Los Angeles International Airport. He turned the image to face the room. Timestamp is post-breakup, or at least post-claimed breakup, Donald stated. This was obtained by the Daily Mail, a surveillance still from LAX. That's you and Mr. Wade, correct? Willis hesitated, staring at the photo as if it had grown teeth. I don't recall that specific moment, she said, her voice measured. It's from after the date you swore under oath that the relationship ended, Donalds cut in, his tone slicing, through any room for ambiguity. You said you were no longer romantically involved, but here you are, catching flights, not feelings, Miss Willis. A few muffled laughs rippled through the back of the room, but Donalds didn't indulge. His face remained firm, locked in. Were you traveling together? He pressed. We may have been on the same flight, Congressman, she responded cautiously. I believe we were attending a conference. With matching luggage, Donalds noted. Silence. And with no one else present in the footage, Willis's eyes narrowed slightly. I wouldn't characterize it as a romantic trip. Donalds raised an eyebrow. Good, because that's not what I'm characterizing either. I'm characterizing it as a contradiction between sworn testimony and objective footage. He leaned, in just enough to ensure every syllable landed with precision. So, either you lied under oath, or the cameras did. Which one is it? No answer. The silence wasn't just deafening, it was recorded, and Donalds knew it. He folded the photo slowly, laid it flat on the table, and tapped his pen once, like a gavel. Without objection, he stated, let the record reflect the contradiction. The witness had no response. The momentum had shifted, not with theatrics, but with something far more damning, a fact that couldn't be explained away. Congressman Byron Donalds didn't need to raise his voice. He simply lifted his hand. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call our next witness, Miss Tarika Hudson, former employee of the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. A murmur rippled through the hearing room. Donald's tone remained polite, almost casual, but his gaze was precise, surgical. This wasn't a detour. This was a direct path to the truth Fani Willis didn't want in the record. Hudson took the oath, sat down, and squared her shoulders like someone who had long accepted this day was inevitable. Donald gave her a small nod. Miss Hudson, thank you for being here. I'll keep this brief and focused. He glanced at the paper in front of him, but his voice was already 3 steps ahead. You were employed in the DA's office under Miss Willis in 2020 and 2021, correct? Yes, Congressman, she replied firmly. And during that time, he continued, locking eyes with her, did Miss Willis ever speak to you directly about her relationship with Mr. Nathan Wade? Hudson hesitated for less than a second. Yes, on multiple occasions in 2020. Yes, in 2021. Did she describe it as a personal relationship? Romantic in nature? Yes, Hudson answered without wavering. She was open about it when we were still on speaking terms. The air in the chamber tightened. Donald's let the words settle. Let the weight of romantic in nature seep into the walls. He leaned forward slightly. Just to be clear, Miss Willis told you, without ambiguity, that she was romantically involved with Mr. Wade before November of 2021? Yes. Donalds nodded slowly, flipping the page before turning his attention across the room. Willis sat still, eyes locked ahead, stone-faced but not unreadable. Then his voice dropped a decibel. When he got quiet, it meant something sharp was coming. And yet, Miss Willis, in 2021, you hired Mr. Wade. You paid him handsomely with public funds, and you swore under oath that the relationship began after that. Silence. He arched an eyebrow, just enough to let the hypocrisy rise to the surface. So we're left with two options. Either Miss Hudson is lying or... You are but one, Miss Willis, who had something to gain from concealing the truth, and nearly 700,000 reasons to keep it buried. Still, no answer. Byron Donalds shifted his tone, not louder but sharper, more deliberate. His words took on a rhythm, the kind that cuts deeper with repetition. This isn't high school drama. This isn't about who dated whom behind whose back. If this were private life, it'd be gossip. But this is taxpayer money and selective prosecution. He leaned back in his chair, letting the phrase settle over the room like a slow-motion death sentence. Even the Democrats stopped fidgeting with their pens, because everyone knew this wasn't about romance anymore. This was about an official lie wrapped in public funds, a political target wrapped in prosecutorial power. And Byron Donalds had just torn the timeline to shreds. The lights dimmed. For a moment, the congressional chamber transformed into something eerily cinematic. Part courtroom, part war room. On the screen, a still frame appeared. Low resolution, black and white, timestamp. Two familiar silhouettes walked side by side through LAX, rolling matching suitcases. No visible entourage, no press, no security, just Fani Willis and Nathan Wade. Donalds didn't look at the screen. He had seen it enough. Instead, he watched Willis. She didn't blink, but her jaw locked, just slightly. The screen flicked to a second frame. Same duo, same suits, different luggage, different gait. Then, darkness. Donalds leaned back, resting one arm casually across the table as if he were just getting warmed up. Miss Willis, I want to revisit your sworn testimony from earlier. You stated your romantic relationship with Mr. Wade ended in, what was it? Late summer 2023? Willis gave a slow nod. That's correct. Was this before or after the airport photos? I don't recall the exact date of that trip, she said carefully. Donald's smile was polite, but his eyes told a different story. Oh, but I do. The timestamp on the footage is several weeks after the date you claim the relationship ended. Now, I'm not here to judge anyone for a casual airport run, especially in a city as spiritually disorienting as Los Angeles, Byron Donalds said, his voice even. But when a district attorney and her supposedly ex-boyfriend, who also happens to be a special prosecutor, are flying across the country together with matching luggage, the word casual starts to feel like an undercharge. A few chuckles rippled through the room. Fani Willis's attorney shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. Byron flipped a page. You told this committee that the relationship had concluded. That's what you swore. But this trip appears to involve no professional staff, no case files, no court business. So allow me to ask, what exactly was the nature of this travel? Willis inhaled sharply. We were attending an event, a legal conference. It was scheduled well before our personal relationship changed. Byron nodded, tapping his pen against the table thoughtfully. A legal conference in L.A., where no one else from your office was present. and where, by sheer coincidence, your former romantic partner, who also happens to be under scrutiny, just so happened to share your flight, your terminal, and your luggage pattern. Willis opened her mouth, but Byron didn't let her speak. Let me try it a different way. Miss Willis, what was in the suitcase? Clothes? Coordination? A pause. Audible, uncomfortable, unforgettable. Willis blinked, then replied, with an edge, Congressman, I don't think it's appropriate to speculate on personal effects. Oh, I'm not speculating, Byron shot back coolly. I'm calculating. Because when someone claims a relationship is over but keeps showing up on flights together, it's not romantic. It's operational. And when the person being flown happens to be billing the taxpayers, the itinerary becomes evidence. He turned a final page and locked eyes with her. You didn't just share a relationship, Miss Willis. You shared itineraries, you shared funding, and you shared targets. Boom. That one landed. Not with theatrics, but with cold, hard math. No rebuttal, no frantic objection, just silence in the face of unshakable logic, the kind that had walked right into the terminal and checked its bag. Byron Donalds didn't need drama. He had receipts, literally. From a leather binder on his desk, he withdrew a stack of documents, neatly tabbed, time-stamped, and fatal in the right hands. Hands like his, Byron began, cool and exacting. Miss Willis, I'd like to discuss the financial arrangement between your office and Mr. Nathan Wade. Fani straightened slightly. She knew what was coming. But knowing and surviving are two different things. According to records obtained from your office and cross-referenced with payment authorizations, Byron continued, the law firm associated with Mr. Wade received over $600,000 in public funds, and by some estimates that number is closer to $700,000 when factoring in fees and disbursements. He paused, letting the number settle. All this for a man with no prior experience prosecuting racketeering cases. Yet somehow he lands the most politically charged case in the country, and the payout of a lifetime. Fani remained still, her eyes flickering briefly to her counsel before returning to Byron. Let me clarify something for the record, he pressed, his voice steady, his tone tightened like a noose. These payments weren't one time. They were recurring and structured. They began shortly after you assumed office and, coincidentally, during the same period that multiple witnesses have now testified you were engaged in a romantic relationship with Mr. Wade. He flipped another page, lifting a document. So tell me, Miss Willis, where is the line between contractual compensation and compensated companionship? Because the math here doesn't lie. He held up the payment schedule. We're looking at monthly invoices. $25,000, $35,000, $40,000. 1 month, he billed $52,000. All paid from the pockets of Fulton County taxpayers. That's not legal work. That's a retainer with benefits. Fani's jaw clenched. Congressman, Mr. Wade was hired for his expertise, Byron cut in with surgical precision. His expertise in airfare coordination and matching luggage aesthetics? Laughter rippled through the room. Sharp, short, disbelieving. Byron didn't smile. Let's be honest, Miss Willis, he continued. If this were simply a case of poor vetting, that would be one thing. But this looks like personal enrichment. It looks like the taxpayers were footing the bill for something more intimate than indictment preparation. Byron leaned forward just enough to freeze the temperature in the room. You can call it compensation, you can call it consulting, but if a man is being paid 6 figures while flying with you out of state, that's not prosecution. He paused, letting the silence set the stage. That's patronage. No one moved. Not a cough, not a whisper. Even the Democrats on the panel sat still, faces carefully blank, because some numbers, some visuals, some truths can't be spun. And Byron Donalds, he was just getting started. Because where the money goes, the motive follows. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The paper in his hand was doing all the shouting. "Let's revisit your testimony under oath, Miss Willis," he said, flipping to the exact line like a seasoned surgeon reaching for a scalpel. "You stated unequivocally that Mr. Nathan Wade never visited your residence in South Fulton in 2019. You repeated that denial for 2020 and again for 2021. He looked up, slow and deliberate. "Are those statements still accurate?" Fani adjusted her microphone. Her voice was clipped and defensive. "Yes, Congressman. I said what I meant. He never came to my home in South Fulton. Not once." Byron nodded, almost kindly. The kind of nod that comes right before a trap door opens. "Interesting," he said, flipping another page. "Because what you failed to mention, Miss Willis, is that you weren't just living in South Fulton during that time. You were also leasing a condo from a Miss YY. Silence. Fani blinked. "And according to your own admission under questioning, Mr. Wade did, in fact, visit that condo. The same one you classified earlier as, and I quote, a place where I laid my head." He leaned in. "So if he never visited your home but did visit the condo where you slept, lived, and presumably weren't hosting bar mitzvahs, then forgive my legal training, but I'm struggling to understand how that's anything but a contradiction." Fani's tone sharpened. "Congressman, I was distinguishing between my primary residence and—" Byron held up a hand, cutting her off. "Miss Willis, let's not." Byron remained unfazed, refusing to play real estate semantics. "Whether you call it a condo, an apartment, a transitional resting space, or the house of the rising sun, if he came to where you lived, he visited your residence. Period." A ripple of muffled laughter swept through the room. Even a few aides looked down, trying to hide their grins. Fani Willis, however, wasn't amused. Her posture stiffened, her eyes narrowed, but the damage was done. The wall she had tried to build between truth and technicality had just crumbled under the weight of her own words. Byron's tone cooled again, surgical precision returning. "You denied visits, then admitted them under pressure. That's not forgetfulness, Miss Willis. That's evasion." He let the silence breathe, then delivered the final blow like a verdict rather than a lie. "If your truth changes by zip code, Miss Willis, then it was never the truth to begin with." She didn't respond, because there was no rebuttal. Not one that wouldn't sink deeper into contradiction. And Byron knew it. He didn't gloat. He simply turned the page because the next layer was waiting, and this witness had already collapsed under the weight of her own geography. For the first time in the hearing, the steel in Fani Willis's voice began to bend. She straightened in her chair, took a deep breath, and let her words drip, not with argument, but with injury. "Congressman, I don't think any of you understand what it's like to be me right now," she began, her voice heavy with practiced weight. "I had to leave my home. The threats, the hate, the pressure. I lost the place I built with my own sweat and tears." Her voice cracked just slightly, not enough to break, but enough to cue the cameras. It was the kind of delivery crafted not for rebuttal, but for headlines. "I don't just come to work to fight crime. I come to work every day knowing that my life has been upended because I had the courage to pursue justice, to hold people accountable, even when those people were powerful, even when they were presidents." She paused, perhaps waiting for the weight of martyrdom to land. It didn't, not with Byron Donalds. He waited. No rush, no reaction. Then he leaned in, slowly, calmly, with the precision of a prosecutor who had heard one too many violins playing over a felony indictment. Byron's expression remained unmoved. "I don't doubt that your life has been difficult. Public service can be costly. But make no mistake, this isn't a therapy session. It's a hearing. And what we're examining here isn't your pain. It's your decisions." Just like that, the emotional haze thinned, and the oxygen in the room shifted back to facts. You say you lost your home. That's unfortunate. But let's be very clear. You didn't lose your home because you prosecuted Donald Trump. You lost it because you blurred every ethical boundary between public duty and personal entanglement. She opened her mouth, but he didn't give her the chance. His voice remained steady, relentless, and lethal in its logic. You weren't threatened because you did your job. You were questioned because you created a professional arrangement, where your romantic partner was paid nearly $700,000 in public money, while maintaining a relationship you denied under oath, and then flew cross-country with you while that relationship was allegedly over. He paused, then lowered his voice just enough to make the next line cut deeper. Ms. Willis, pain doesn't erase misconduct. Being emotional doesn't make you innocent. It only makes you evasive. That one landed like a cold gavel. She blinked, her expression unreadable. No one in the room moved. Even the Democrats on the dais didn't dare object, not because they agreed, but because there was nothing in the record to contradict it. Byron glanced briefly at his notes, then closed the folder. Because sometimes the silence after a hard truth is the only punctuation you need. At this point in the hearing, he no longer needed to raise his voice. His tone had become its own kind of evidence. What came next wasn't loud. It was quiet, calculated, lethal. He slid a new folder across the table, burgundy, unmarked, thick enough to contain something dangerous. He didn't open it immediately. Instead, he looked directly at Fani Willis, and this time, there wasn't a trace of performance in his face, only the look of a man who already knew the answer. Miss Willis, he began, you've insisted repeatedly that Mr. Wade was hired on the basis of merit, legal acumen, and professional compatibility. He let the words settle, then slowly cracked the folder open. And yet, we now have documentation showing that a substantial portion of Mr. Wade's payments. Stay tuned, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.